welcome to episode 57 of the Martial Truth Podcast, my interview with Andreas Quast Sensei. Quast Sensei is an author and one of the premier martial arts researchers, especially in the area of Okinawan Karate and Okinawan Kobudo. His new book, Bo, Volume 1, explores Okinawan Bojutsu through the lens of the Bo Udori, the dance village traditions of the Bo you find in many of the smaller islands and the towns and villages in Okinawa that predates many of the kata and Bo practices that we see in modern Kobudo. Highly recommend, excellent book. Quast Sensei also has several other books, a stroll along Ryukyu martial arts history, which I'm showing you on my Kindle. I have 3 of his books on my Kindle. Also, we have Martial Arts of the Ryukyu by Choki Motobu, excellent book. Oni Yoshiru, Hero of Okinawan Martial Art. Matsumura Sokan's 7 Virtues of Martial Arts. And of course, his major work, Karate 1.0, which in this interview he'll discuss the future of this book and possible other formats the book may be coming out in. All right, so as usual, please click that like button, subscribe, right? Consider becoming a member. It's only $2.99 a month. You get these podcasts with no commercials, so they're commercial free for $2.99 a month. You get all the instructional videos that I'm constantly posting. We have over 120 videos up now available for members. So please consider becoming a member, subscribe, share the videos. All right. So I hope you like this one. I know I enjoyed the interview myself, so please sit back and enjoy the Andreas Quast interview. Thanks. Andreas Quast, welcome to the Martial Truth Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Michael Sensei.
I find it's this one, for me personally, I've been looking forward to. Like, I don't even care if anybody else watches it. I'm just glad that I'm getting to sit down and talk to you and discuss martial arts related subjects, and obviously talk about your books, which let me mention this one right now before we get started. The Bo Volume 1. Quast Sensei was nice enough to send me a copy, and very interesting book done in a very different format, covering a lot of the older Bo practices that you find in the villages and cities and towns and islands of Okinawa. And what's great about it is you read a section explaining it, and there's a QR code, and you scan the QR code, and it takes you to a video to watch the actual performance of the Bo dances and Bo practices that you were just reading about. So I think it's a great format. It's really interesting. I'm excited that it's Volume 1, which means there's going to be more volumes, right? Which is great. So why don't we start off with this? Why this type of Bo book?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for mentioning the book. From my learning history, from my chronology, of course, I started with the usual sports, right? In a youth sports club, and I think 50 years ago I entered the association, a municipal sports club, an athletic club, and then I went through like normal gymnastics or physical education,
right.
and so on and so on. And when I started with karate, I was a late starter. I started with the karate and jiu-jitsu, excuse us, and soon afterwards I met someone who lived in Okinawa for many years, and she taught Kobudo.
Okay.
And it was so interesting, and since then I started to research all sorts of everything, and it's so confusing when you would beam yourself back and you would place in front of yourself all these lineages and names and kata names, and it's so confusing. And so I just wanted to get through it, yeah. And this is this Bo Odori thing. It's a specific part of Okinawan martial arts or Ryukyu martial arts, right? So it's relatively unknown to most people. It is sometimes not ridiculed, but it's looked a little bit down, like, oh, well, this is festival bojutsu, or this is not real bojutsu. But looking at it, they have long histories, right? And so they have a histories that go, they have similar histories than the martial arts Kobudo.
Well, the other thing is watching some of the videos, right? I mean, the techniques are there. Like, again, okay, unless you want to put your head in the sand, the techniques are there. And again, anybody that studies weapons arts, and I've studied a lot of weapons arts, both Japanese, ancient arts, Okinawan arts, the techniques came first. This idea of kata and these patterns that they create with these weapons are great, but the original method was just two guys practicing with each other, swinging weapons, trying to be able to defend themselves. And you can almost see that in these Bo-Odori dances, where, you know, it's the original way where two guys are just, you know, and again, obviously they've stylized it now because it's part of a cultural demonstration of what they're doing, a celebration. I think you mentioned that a lot of them are religious based. You know, they might be, you know, banishing evil spirits, whatever the story is. But it's clear that the fighting techniques are there. It's not like they're not there.
That's right. So it's a different context. It's a context where the average martial artist in the West would say, "Oh no,
right.
Thank you, I'm good.
Right.
You know, please, no religion, no this, no that." Right. It's also too confusing again because of terminology and all these concepts. They right. are alien to us,
right,
and difficult to understand.
Right.
So one thing that I did here in the book was trying to build up a terminology, and you find it in the end of the book. There's an index with the with all the names of the techniques and so. And you mentioned the Kumibo. The name Kumibo itself it's a name that comes from this Bo-Odori.
Okay.
So it's not something that is this name, this word itself, is not unique to martial arts.
So it's interesting in the Isshinryu karate tradition, the Kobudo aspect of Isshinryu, of which there's a lot of Kobudo in Isshinryu. It's just that a lot of the Isshinryu people aren't very good at it because they didn't pay as much attention to it. But you know, it's called Bobo Kumite, Bosai Kumite. But when I trained with Gaka Sensei in the Matayoshi tradition, he always referred to it as Kumibo, as Kumi Waza. Like, it was always Kumi Waza. I never ever heard him refer to it as Bobo Kumite or Bosai Kumite or Sai Kumite techniques. It was always Sai Kumi Waza, Bo Kumi Waza, Nunchaku Kumi Waza. So it's interesting. So I had heard that term before from Gakkiya, and I use it in my Kobudo classes. And frankly, I use it in my Isshinryu classes now too, because I think it's a correct term. But it's interesting that it comes from these Bo-Odori, these Bo dances, these Bo village and island demonstrations that they have in Okinawa, you know.
Yes, it's interesting. And the thing is, you know, you mentioned Gakka Sensei, and I never trained with him. I didn't know him. I only heard of him because he was so adamant about the practical implementation of the techniques.
Right.
And when you're watching him doing the Kumibo, right. It was just whoa.
Right.
It was
right.
just. You know, you feel the danger for the fingers all right. the time. Right?
Well, it's funny. It's funny you mention that. So my original Matayoshi Kobudo instructor was a guy by the name of Nishiuchi Mikio, but he trained with Kinjo Takashi Sensei, who, you know, is a good Kobudo, but when I went to Okinawa in '97, I met Gakia, and I became his student. And they did a demonstration in '97 because it was the grand opening of the Budokan. So the Matayoshi did a demonstration, and I remember when they did the Kumi Waza. Like, I remember as a couple of them walked off, they were pointing at their fingers and basically like nudging the guy next to him as they walked off, like, "Oh yeah, you got me there," And me being into more of the practical aspect of it, I saw that and I was like, "Oh, these are the guys I got to train with." Like, these guys seem like they're having fun, but yeah, okay, I got my finger nicked, but no, who cares? We're training, we're having fun, it's no big deal. So that was the reason why I went with Gakia Sensei after that, and the Matayoshi tradition in terms of Gakia, the way his approach was to it, and it's the approach I take in my own dojo. So a little dangerous, but a little more fun.
It's funny, actually, my first teacher at Kobudo, she was a Catherine Baxter-Kopolos, and I asked her, with a friend, we asked her, what's the most practical style in Kobudo, in Okinawa and in karate? And she said, well, in karate, it's obviously it's Uechi-ryu, and in Kobudo, it's Matayoshi Kobudo.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. Sadly, since Matayoshi Sensei died, it's kind of all over the place now. But that seems to be a pattern with every single art. Once especially, a popular or a very well-known headmaster passes away, it seems like everybody wants to be a chief, and nobody wants to be just the Indian. They all want to, and they all go off and kind of start their own things, which is sad in one respect. And I know Gakia Sensei and Yosei Yogi Sensei said to me one time about Matayoshi Sensei, they said he took many kata with him to heaven. And, so again, another thing, a question of, well, what did he take with him that, we've lost now, that we no longer have an opportunity to see or practice, And I think the Matayoshi is interesting because of some of the weapons they practice, which have links back to China, like the Tinbei, the Tsuruchin, it's interesting. But again, talking about the Kobudo, and I know you're what I like about you is that you're not into the fake martial arts history. Like, again, there's a place for the legends and all that stuff. That's fantastic. I like hearing that stuff too. It's fun. But I really want to know what the true story is. I don't care if a kata is only 25 years old or 50 years old. But, when a kata is only not that very old, and you're claiming that it's, 500 years old or 300 years old. Well, where's the proof of that, And like in your research, what are some of the older Kobudo kata that you've discovered? How far do they actually go back realistically?
Well, that's a very good question. So this is actually, again, returning to the point you asked me, why did I did the book? And there is a part of the answer is in the book, because if you look at these stories, and these are village stories,
right?
So these have been handed down in each of the villages, and they had a competition among the villages. And there's one story, for instance, I don't remember exactly. It was one particular region or island, and they had a festival each year, and they're very secretive. And then there's a story of three guys from a different village setting out on a canoe in the night, crossing over, and then going to the jungle, over the hill, and then sneaking in, looking. And they had a few sticks with them, and then they watched the performances with three persons, so you have 6 eyes, right? So you have a lot of memory that you can put together. So you maybe retain 80% of everything,
right?
Which is good, right?
Yeah.
And then they went back afterwards to the shore, and then they tried it out, and they paddled back to their home, and then on the shore they tried it again, and then they made their own tradition of it. The other guys, they found out about it, and they were angry, of course. They were like, damn, they stole it. And this kind of competition is interesting because it has a serious background, of course, because if the other guy doesn't know your technique, you're gonna win. If you
Right.
right, if you know his technique, you know he's gonna do it like this.
Right.
But you worked on the counter for that,
Right.
right? And these stories are extremely interesting. And they, most of them, they go back like 150, 200, 300 years even.
Okay.
To, for instance, to Tsuken Island. I tried to name the usernames in the Okinawan language simply for the reason because they are set in the Okinawan language. For example, when they say they have very descriptive technical names, are different than for instance in Ryukyu Kobudo, you say Shomenuchi, you say Chudan Uke. The perspective of reference you have is from yourself, and then a little bit the direction. But these old techniques, they tell you knock him in the head, thrust him in the eye, hit him in the knee.
Right.
They call it like ashigiri. Achigiri is such an ashi to the foot, and giri is a cutting. So you can imagine that. Well, if it's cutting, then there might be some sort of, blade or whatever tool on some end of it. And also, there are dangerous techniques which you wouldn't normally immediately teach, or which, for cultural reasons today, like if you consider the UNESCO application, you don't want to tell the UNESCO guys, look, we are the martial arts of peace, and we thrust the other guy in the eye with a harpoon or something. It doesn't work.
Right. Yeah, I mean, which again, to me, is a big problem for karate right now. Meaning that on Okinawa, like I asked Yogi Yosei Sensei, and he told me karate in Okinawa has painted itself into a box. Now he's 90 years old, and he said that it's the box of tournament competition. So he goes like, Michael, I don't do tournaments, so that means my karate is no good. He said, and they're basing everything now in Okinawa on how well you do in tournaments. And like in my world, coming from the world of being a police officer for 22 years, I never had an interest as karate for a tournament. I'm only interested in it saving my life and saving somebody else's life. But it's interesting now how Okinawa, and again, I try to be honest in certain things. And what Okinawan karate master has engaged in an actual fight in the last 50, 60, 70 years? I mean, Okinawa is very safe. No one's being asked to actually, use their karate in a life and death situation really on Okinawa. I mean, that's few and far between. I think in the West, you have a lot more of that, where people are still actually using the practical aspects of karate. So it's interesting that it's the same thing kind of with the Kobudo. I mean, one of the things I talk about all the time is when people practice partner techniques with the Kobudo, the distance is all off. No one's going for an actual target. They're actually just doing the stuff in the middle between the two people. Like they're just banging their weapons together. And, when you start doing that, you lose the martial aspect of it. And for me, that energy that you get from where you actually go for a target and the other person has to actually defend against it, I think is important. The other thing I wanted to mention, noticing with a lot of the videos I watched of the Bo Idori dances is twofold. One, the use of a shorter weapon, a shorter bow staff, tanbo, whatever you want to call it. And the other thing is the extending of the weapon. A lot of the techniques where they're using the weapon to full extension. And, another thing, interesting aspect with Gaka Sensei is, he'd show you a kata like Shushinokun, and he'd show you, holding it a third and a third. And there were a couple of spots where you extended the bow, and he'd show you that. And then after you got proficient, he'd show you the kata again, and he'd do the whole kata with the bow extended. And, like other people might go, oh, wait a second, that's sacrilege. Like, wait, no, he's not changing anything. Another thing he'd do is he'd do the bow kata without changing grips. He wouldn't change the grips when he did the kata. And one of the things he said to me, he says, Michael, I believe if we were to use this in a real fight, we wouldn't be changing grips. Changing grips in the middle of combat is a potential problem. Could lose the bow, could whatever. And just some things he said. And I found it interesting watching the videos connected with the book, that how they extend the bow, you know, in certain things they're doing that you don't see a lot anymore in modern Kobudo. Everybody's just doing the third and the third, and just kind of, that's it. That's all they do. They're not going beyond that third and the third concept of using the bow, you know. What are your thoughts on that, seeing that in the bow dance as the extension of the bow being used?
Oh yeah, very good observation. It's one thing that I also noticed while I was working on the book, because you know, the 3-3 division, the 3/3 division, I was told that this comes from the Bo-Odori. This comes from the village Bojutsu, and also the opening. Like, and you see this in the kata, all the opening, the up there, and then the raising of the arm here, that comes from there.
Okay.
So it might be an older form, and of course the martial arts Kobudo guys, they don't want to hear this, right? But it might be an older form which they took when Budo was introduced to Okinawa from 1905, 1910, and then specifically from the 1930s to 45, right? Because they were like just militarized society, and so, and it was more like militaristic, like wearing uniforms and Ichini-san, and they had these youth groups, you know. They had this, in every village in Okinawa, they had a so-called Seinendan, and today they are nice groups. They are modern democratic groups today. It's called Seinen Kai, but back then. They took a how can I say, Japan took the idea from other like similar countries, very strict authoritarian countries. They said they found out long ago in the 1900s and the 1800s, conscription, we need young guys. And so they went there and they said everyone who's in elementary school, they are 6 years in elementary school, and then they are 13 or 14, and until 20, when they get conscripted, when they get checked for conscription, when they get put into the military, they're gonna go into the Seinendan, and in these youth groups, they're gonna do all these super great things, like athletics, running, drinking, maybe, you know, helping in festivals, making some bow, and you know, whether it's a spear or a bow or a bayonet, it didn't really matter in the end. So they were drilled basically. And the standard procedure was that usually there was a person, a reserve officer from that era who did the training. So it was kind of an education. Like that, you know, but it was for a reason. So the reason is preparing them for potential military service. Yes, and I guess that this was part of the 20th century, first half of the 20th century. It escalated from school PE around 1905, you know. Let's train the young guys a little bit, but, you know, and that's the difference a little bit between maybe between the Bo-Odori and the Budo karate they did back then, right? So, and there were many, but there was an exchange all the time. There was an intermingling all the time. So these classical groups here, they were also part of this. They were the same, and you know, but the length, the full extension, and the weapon, and this is interesting. Also from a technical point of view, of course, what you said with the full extension. That's right. And if you look at the two modi, the two different, the modus 1, the Bo-Odori, and the modus 2, the Yakusoku, it's both the Yakusoku kumite most of the time. It's still Still in the modern Kobudo, the martial arts Kobudo, it's still Yakusoku, but they have a different timing. They have in mind, they are onlookers. There's an audience,
Right.
right, and I wanna look on. I wanna dominate that other guy because he's just a third dan and I'm a fifth dan or something, you know.
Right.
So you have this dominator. He's very cool and very strong, and the other guy is a loser basically. He gives him an attack and then he dies or something.
Right. No, it's true.
And in the Bo-Odori, you have a different rhythm, right? You have the music, which is, I mean, it's a pain sometimes, right?
Right.
Depending on, it's just so loud and chaotic, and the guys with the gongs and you know, it's full of it's hot-blooded a little bit, you know. It's meant for this, but the rhythm is different. But they do the difference, and they give you time. They say, they come with the attacking Jodan Kamai or whatever, and then they come at you and they stop. So you can communicate. Are you ready? Or are you sleeping? Because I'm going to strike now, and they're going to strike to the sound of the gong. So both people, they know now it's coming, and I need to react. I cannot just pretend because the strikes are real.
Right.
Although it looks theatrical, right? It looks a little all this on, and all this this rhythm and there's a certain feeling, but you can't translate that to martial arts. Take away the music. Put on a dogi. Right. Have some sensei standing there. Make the kill face, and they're doing this. This is an amazing thing. They have something that is the same as a kiai, similar as a kiai. And they have this kill face. It has a name. It's like michichi. It's like eye thrust. Eye thrust. Okay. And then this is what they do these when they do these faces. And it's basically I guess it's similar than if you look at modern karate competition. They do the same. Right. I think they're similar to soccer players. You wonder, do they bring their own hairdresser like before sitting in front of the mirror, and you know everything's fine and everything looks great in this show and this facial expression, you know. And Ryo Kiuna of Ryu, he said to study Ryukyu theatrical drama, like old opera, just for the bearing and for the expression, for the postures and the expressions.
Yeah. I did a demonstration one time, a sword demonstration, and there was a Japanese person in the audience, and they told me afterwards that when they squinted their eyes, they thought they were seeing Toshiro Mifune. And it was probably one of the greatest compliments I've ever received, right? Because you look at him in the movies and the way he carries himself, presents himself. And when she said that to me, I started laughing, of course, right? But I literally said to her, I said, I don't think I'm ever going to get a better compliment than that in my life, you know? And I wanted to mention to you too, last year I was part of a series of seminars here in Arizona. And one group came from Lua. Lua is the Hawaiian martial art that the Hawaiian, royal family, that's the bodyguards of the royal family. They use this martial art. So a guy came and he taught a Lua seminar, and he knew I did Okinawan Kobudo. So it was interesting. Lua uses the bow a third and a third also. Oh. And the other thing he said was, so it's interesting. I thought right away because of both island nations, right? But also the idea that, in Okinawa, you don't have as much iron, right? So you don't have I don't think as many people carrying swords and bladed weapons as you did like in Japan, right? And he was explaining that in Hawaii, they virtually had no metal. So they would use shark teeth, and they would attach shark teeth to the edges of the weapons, and they would use that to cut. And he goes, and they didn't care because if the shark teeth broke off, there were shark teeth all over the sand. They just pick them up and put new ones in. But I found it interesting, and I found that art interesting. But they also have bodor. They have a bodor weapon. They have the bow. Okay. They have a tanbo. So you saw very similar weapons, and they also have some bladed things, but you saw very similar weapons to Okinawa. And I just couldn't help, thinking that they're both islands. Their metal or, iron is limited on both. And, it's interesting that they're both starting initially when you learn the bow, that third and the third position, So I just found it interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they both have been kind of colonized, like just integrated by bigger fish.
Right.
And then, which probably sparks the desire to protect your own cultural heritage.
Oh, sure. I agree. 100%. Right. I mean, sadly, like the European heritage and the American heritage, right? Like America has a long wrestling history, right? Catch can wrestling, and obviously, pugilism, boxing, right? But the wrestling tradition's old. I mean, Abraham Lincoln was known to be a really, really good wrestler. Europe, you have fencing, you have wrestling, right? But we didn't necessarily codify it. Like the Japanese and the Okinawans did, right? Now there's been more of an attempt to kind of codify that and bring back those ancient traditions, whether it be, here in the States with the older style wrestling, or in, Europe with the HEMA, historical European martial arts movement, which I find, pretty interesting when I've seen a bunch of it, So I think there is this idea of protecting your culture and protecting a cultural asset, So
there are many facets to it, like, and these are several points that you mentioned that are, of course, they're very good. Yes. Can I return to you said there are different lengths of bow, 3, 4, 5, 6 shakubo,
right?
Which I find is extremely interesting because the standard bow in Kobudo today is 6 foot.
Right.
This is the 6 foot. If you look at the old photos of Okinawans, like the Funakoshi photo in 1921, where they performed for the Crown Prince, later Emperor Hirohito, they have a thin bow, like maybe 2.5 centimeters, and they were long. They were quite longer, right? And then, of course, it's a rokushaku bow. Right. And still today, everybody has a rokushaku bow. But if you are 1.90 meters or 6'5" or something, right. you have to adapt the length of the bow.
One student in New York is 6'4" tall. He's got a 6.5 foot bow. Because the 6 foot bow seems just it looks weird when he's using it, right? Yeah, and then one of the last times I trained with Gaka Sensei before he got sick, I was at his dojo and he took out an 8 or 9 foot bow, and he handed it to me and he said, "Okay, Mike, do Sakagawa," and it's a very different feeling. I mean, I highly recommend people get a longer bow and try doing some of your bow kata with the longer bow, because it will train you in a very different way. I mean, it's very, very interesting. The training with the different sizes of the bow. So,
So is it, right? And then one interesting thing is, like, they have the rokushaku bow, and some dojo they do for fun. They like to do Filipino eskrima.
Right.
Yeah. And then they say something like, "Oh, we have a nitan bow," as if it was a historical martial art in Okinawa. It might have been, but in the martial arts traditions, I don't think it was ever heard of before the 1950s or so.
Right.
So it might be a new development, or they took it from the bo odori. Because the bo odori, they have all of them.
Right. They have all different sizes.
Yes, they have on Miyako, they have 1 shaku, that's 30 something centimeters. 1 foot. The two shakubo, they are double two shakubo. They are 3 shakubo, which is usually the sword. It's a marked sword.
Right.
So then they have 4, 5, 6, and then the longer one, 7 or 8, or 9 shaku even, which obviously probably came from the spear. Right. The twirling techniques, all these here, it doesn't make too much sense with the very long bow.
Right.
I guess. So,
Well, yeah, because what I was going to say was I studied Shindo Musuru Jiu-jitsu for 30 years. So, that's the 4-foot staff versus the samurai sword, and 400-year-old tradition in Japan.
Yeah.
You learn, one of the things is the jo is slightly longer than the sword. So you have a small reach advantage over the swordsman. Then the other thing you learn is, obviously with the sword, you can't twirl the sword. You do Iai like me. So you're holding the sword by the handle, so you can only use it a certain way. But with the jo, you quickly realize, oh, I can do a lot with this weapon because it's not as long as the bow. I can actually spin it. I can manipulate it in a way that very difficult for the swordsman to handle. And so it's true. It's the shorter staff you can manipulate much easier than the longer weapon. There's no question about it.
Absolutely. Actually, the Wakushakubo is difficult. It's difficult because you have the length, you have the weight, and you would want to swing it like that, like the moulinette in the French baton,
right,
or like this, and it would be so much easier if you hold it at the end. But no, you have to have the 3-3, so it's always somehow in the way. One end is always in the way, so that's why it's so difficult to understand and to convince people that it's practical, actually.
So I'm going to bring this up, right? So in Isshinryu, we have the Tokumini no Kun tradition, right? And, so Tatsuo Sensei learned it from Kion. And, for years people said Tatsuo was on Okinawa during the war. So he was on Okinawa with his family. And the old legend is, he was teaching the Japanese military his karate, and that's why he didn't have to be conscripted. And that's utter nonsense. I spoke to his son, and who's my teacher, and Kichiro Sensei said to me, he says, Michael, we were not on the island. We were in Kyushu. And I said, well, when did you get off Okinawa? He says, we got off Okinawa in 41. My father put us all on a boat and took us to the southernmost island of Kyushu. And I said, well, when did you come back? He said, we came back in 1945 after the war was over. So that means he was in Fukuoka, Kyushu from 41 to 45, right? So that means if he had to have learned Tokumini no Kun before, because Kion died in 45. So, when I look at Tatsuo's version of Tokumini no Kun, you talk about the extending of the bow. In the video I have up of him where he does where they flip the bow over and do the big swing, almost like a baseball bat. The video I have of him in 56 doing it, he does that swing with one hand. And at the very end of the swing, he thrusts. And I've had one first-generation student who studied with Tatsuo say to me, yeah, that's how he practiced it a lot. And you see, most modern Isshinryu guys don't do the thrust at the end of the swing. And here's the founder. Now, obviously, in 56, he's in peak physical condition. He's at the top of his game, right? And he's swinging this bow with one hand, stopping it on a dime, and then thrusting it, right? And I practice it, and sometimes I can do it, and I'm 60 now. I'm not as young as I used to be, but I'm still amazed at the fact that he could do that. And I don't know, he might have just done it as an exercise thing, right? If I'm working that and swinging with that one arm to really make my arm strong. But the interesting thing is, again, the extension of the bow in that form. And, I know you're into the history of all this stuff. I look at the Nakazato version of Tokumini, and, it's not, doesn't have the same feeling as the version we're doing in Isshinryu. And the other thing I'll say is, I know for a fact that Tatsuo didn't think his Kobudo was that great. Like he himself personally, even though he studied with Taira Sensei, and I know guys that were in the dojo when Taira Sensei was there. So they witnessed Tatsuo training with Taira Shinken Sensei. And Tatsuo, to more than one of his students, these early Marines that trained with him, said to them, listen, if you really want to learn Kobudo, you should go train with a Kobudo master. So he was being honest in the assessment of his own Kobudo ability, right? Obviously, he loved Kobudo because the kata he picked to be included in the Isshinryu they are not easy kata. I mean, they're all they are difficult. Like the people that study Matayoshi with me, if they do Matayoshi first and they learn the 5 Matayoshi bow kata, and they start, and then they're doing Isshinryu, and they get to the Isshinryu bow kata, they normally look at me and are like, these are hard. Like, these are hard bow kata. And I'm like, the 3 he picked are very, very hard kata, But like I said, sadly, most Isshinryu people don't have a good understanding of the Kobudo. Training with, obviously, Gaka Sensei really improved my Isshinryu Kobudo. Like, I'm not one of these guys that says, oh, well, the Isshinryu Sensei all say to do it like this, even though I see it and I know it's wrong. Like if I change it. And that the current headmaster, Shimabuku Kichido, he's seen me do a Shishino-kun, the Isshinryu version, which is a very long kata. And I've done it, and he was like, oh, fantastic, like great. And it doesn't look exactly like the way some of the other guys are doing, but he could tell the techniques are correct, and the usage of the bow is correct. And that's one of the big things I'm striving for in my own personal practice, is to really have an understanding of how to manipulate that bow at a high level, which is very difficult. I mean, it's very, very difficult, so I don't know what your thoughts are on my Tokumini hypothesis, but I just can't for the life of me think that Tatsuo, who didn't think of himself as a top-notch Kobudo practitioner, created that kata. Like I can't for the life of me see it. I firmly believe he learned that kata from Kion, and that's why he learned it before he went to Fukuoka. And that's why we have that tradition in Isshinryu. And that's why I think the Nagazato's version is different, because I'm not even sure Nakazato learned the form from Kion. I know the other 2 didn't learn. I know Shimabukudo didn't learn it from Kion. They learned it, I believe, from Nakazato Sensei after the war.
So I think it's pretty difficult, because I think, the number 1 guys, they're always good and benevolent most of the time, right? But number 2 guys and number 3 guys, they're evil, straightforward, often, and I'm doing it just to make the case.
No, but I understand exactly what you're talking about, and I 100% agree with it. So continue with your.
Yeah. So they're building narratives of singularity inheritance, or like. There's only one, like, the Highlander, things like that. Right? And this is simply not true. I don't think it's true. I cannot remember exactly, but some years ago I looked into like Senshin and Senshin of Isshinryu is specific. It's clear that it's not like the Senshin that is done in Jundokan or Meibukan. But if you consider when these guys started training, at what point in life of Miyagi, and that Miyagi was creating his curriculum, we are now finding out. We found it in recent years. We found out that he trained with Motobu Choki, and while everybody said, because they didn't have an answer, all these techniques that came all from China.
Right, that's the go-to answer, right? Well, it came from China.
Yeah.
But no one can tell us where in China it came from. But go ahead.
and things like that. So, and as far as I remember, Shirabuku Tatsuo, he was in the same school as Nagamine maybe for some time, around 1929 or so, and that was when Miyagi was teaching there.
Okay.
So the possibility here is, and you cannot overlook that, even if you're from a different party. I mean, you can, but that's just ideology.
Right.
That's right. You have to consider that. Well, obviously, Tatsuo might have learned this kata at a point where it just looked like that, as it looked like now. While afterwards he parted and Miyagi went a different way, and he continued to develop it and changed it.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I'll give you a couple of my things with that. Is one is, like myself, my own research into Isshinryu. I don't think anyone can conclusively say that Tatsuo 100% learned the form from Miyagi. Now, there's a good chance he did, or a version of it from Miyagi. One of my things is the version we do in Isshinryu. Maybe that's the way Tatsuo remembered it. So that maybe that's why it's a little different. Okay. And again, like, what's the big deal? But I will tell you, I asked Tokumura Kensho. This is going back about 20 years ago, maybe even more, 25 years ago. I asked him at a seminar, I said, Sensei, how often did Tatsuo Sensei train with Miyagi? And, his answer was so much common sense, right? That, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to ask him. I wanted to see what he thought. He goes, well, he said, Kion Sensei lived very close by. Like, Kion Sensei was very close to where Tatsuo lived. So he was overtraining with Kion all the time. He goes, but Miyagi Sensei was kind of far. And he goes, so I don't think he was going to train with Miyagi Sensei like he was training with Kion Sensei. And, again, I said to myself, we look for all these fantastical reasons for things, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe the simple reason that Tatsuo didn't train with Miyagi as much was it was far. Travel was difficult. It was tough to get there. I mean, we just don't know. But to me, that's as good an answer as any other answer we're going to get. That the difficulty was in getting to the place where Miyagi was to train. But, and it's the same thing with the Motobu. We say, I've been told Tatsuo trained with Motobu Sensei. I mean, I believe he did, because if you look at Sun Tzu kata, some of the Motobu fighting drill techniques are in that kata. Not exactly the way Motobu does them, but very similar. And an Isshinryu Sensei pointed that out to me, Sherman Harrell, which when he pointed it out, it was like, to me, it was like, oh my God, right? Yeah. Some of the techniques from the Motobu fighting drills are in the kata that Tatsuo created. And people are like, well, where does this technique come from? Okay, well, maybe that's where it comes from. So even if maybe Tatsuo just learned the kumite drills from Motobu, liked them so much that he decided to put some of them in the kata. But, again, I think with a lot of this historical stuff, it's like putting together a puzzle.
It is. It is frustrating, because there are so many contradictory stories. Then, particularly in the post-war era, there were new influences. Everything changed. The whole setting changed. It was a democratic society right now, also under American military rule until 1972. So the dojo popped up around the base gates and all that, because it was it was a good chance of making a career and even becoming a star worldwide, and people know that. And that's why you earlier said it's an asset. It's an asset. It's a cultural asset, but it's also it's a good income. If you have 10,000 students registered, you don't have to work for you get the annual income, you get the merchandise, you get the grading and all of that.
Well, you know what happened with Tatsuo in the 50s. he got the United States contract with the United States Marine Corps to teach karate.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
So he was getting paid $25 a month per Marine. At one time, they had over 200 Marines training in the dojo. They had to build a separate dojo, right? So, one of the things what Tatsuo did was he sent his oldest son, Kichiro Shimabuku, my teacher, he sent him to Tokyo University. And Kichiro studied business. And when he came back, he took that money and he invested it in real estate all over Okinawa. He's a very wealthy man. And one of the things he said to me is, he said, karate is not a good business. He said, real estate's a really good business. But he said, because his real estate business is so good, it doesn't matter if he has 1 student or 100 students. It doesn't matter, right? And, but yeah, I often hear that story. And also that's one of the reasons I know for a fact that there's a lot of animosity from some of the other teachers towards Isshinryu and Tatsuo because of the fact that he had that contract at a time when people were hard, very, very tough times. And here he was making all this money, and I'm sure their feeling was, well, why should he get it? Especially the fact that Isshinryu was kind of a newer style and not one of the more established ones. And then Tatsuo was very good friends with Uichi Sensei, and he helped Uichi Sensei also get a contract. So Uichi Sensei also had a contract with the United States military also. So it's just interesting when you know that component to understand why there's a little bit still to this day of animosity towards Isshinryu on Okinawa from some of the other groups. And, and I understand it. I mean, times were tough after the war. I get it, So, but, you talk about confirming things in history, right? So Pat McCarthy's sitting in my living room, and we're talking about the different fist configurations in the Bubishi. And Pat McCarthy shows this fist that looks like this. And he says you hit with these 2 points here on the knuckle. And he says Joe and Nakazato showed him that fist, right? And I literally almost fell off my chair because I said to him, I says, oh, Sherman Harrell showed me that fist. And he said Tatsuo Shimabuku showed it to him. And McCarthy's eyes lit up and he goes, so Tatsuo studied with Kion. Nakazato says Kion showed him that fist. Now Sherman Harrell learned that fist from Tatsuo. Now we've got confirmation that this was probably a fist configuration that Kion taught. So I'm with Zenpo Shimabukuro down in Georgia, and I go up to him and I ask him about the fist. And before I even show him the fist, his response to me is, Tatsuo make. With vehemence, not in a nice way. And, at the time, I'm an 8th Dan. And if you want to go with the whole rank thing, well then, okay, with all due respect, I get your 10th Dan, but, I'm an 8th Dan. I'm doing this a long time, and I'm not going to put up with your BS. I said, no, Tatsuo did not make. And, I forcefully said to him, I said, did your father ever show you a fist like this? And he said, no. And I said, okay. Right. And again, that doesn't take away from his father's knowledge of karate. But I was just curious, was I going to get a third confirmation from a third Kion student, right? That this was something that Kion would teach on occasion. And the funny thing was, as Sherman Harrell said to me, he says, Mike, I was a kid when I was in the Marine Corps and I was training with Tatsuo. I have no idea to this day why he came over to me that day and showed me that fist. Because I've got to be honest with you, Andreas, I have never heard another first-generation student say to me, hey, Mike, let me show you this fist that Tatsuo showed me. Harrell was the only one. And he was as bewildered, as anybody else. I don't know why he showed me that fist. I still to this day don't know why he showed me. But he says, Mike, I'm telling you. And then when McCarthy, when we're talking about it and it turns out someone else had it, and it just goes to show you how difficult it is to, on even a simple thing like a fist position, to get a confirmation from somewhere else, another party that, oh yeah, this is something Kion taught. You know, it's just crazy how difficult it is, you know?
It is. And you have a detail, and it's so much work, and the stuff you need beforehand, you need 10, 20, 30 years of study before in order to assess this problem in the first place.
Right.
So, but let me get the book. I'm getting to it. Wait. I know that the fist, by chance I have this here. These are the books by
right. He has the fist in there, I believe. It's a very similar.
You know that, right?
Yeah.
It is in there. I know it's in there. I just remembered it.
Yeah.
And so it must have been an old style fist.
Right. And again,
it must have been.
So again, you talk about an old style fist, right? So like, you know, I teach, obviously, because I'm more interested in self-defense, I teach certain hand configure. Yeah, right. So again, right. So, you know, again, like when you're only doing karate for tournament competition, you don't need these different fists.
No.
What do you need them for? You don't need them, right? And you know, again, but in self-defense, I can tell you, you know, the single finger strike, the 2-finger strike, right? The Phoenix Eye fist. These can be valuable tools in real combat, right? But if all I'm going for is a judge's score, if I'm doing a performance of kata that has no basis in reality, I don't need to know these fists. There's no reason for it. And, you know, so that's why, like in my school, I teach all that stuff because, again, I want people to have the different tools. I want them to have all these different tools at their disposal, and then they can decide what tools they like and what tools they want to use, you know?
So people should appreciate that because everyone's different. And the one guy says, I cannot use it. You know, I'm going to hurt my fingers. Thank you. And the other guy, he's going to play around with it. And he's going to be suddenly he's going to be so good with it that it's going to be his favorite tool or whatever. You know?
Right. And I say that all the time. As a sensei, my job is like, you know, I teach all kinds of fighting techniques. And a lot of them I don't like. Like for me personally, that I don't like them. But again, I'm 5'7", 160 pounds. What if I got the guy who's 6'5", 225? The techniques I like may not work for him. So I teach so many different techniques, and then people can figure out as they go through their training which ones work for them the best. And those are the techniques they should use. But again, if you're doing everything from a sport perspective, there's no need for that.
It depends on the background, I guess.
Right.
Which you have when you enter karate, or even before. That's very important. I guess. I mean, if, for instance, if you're younger, if you're a university student and you're doing like economics or maybe like humanities or something that has nothing, there's no danger, there's no physical danger whatsoever.
Right.
The worst thing that can happen is that the elevator gets stuck one day. Maybe, you know where I'm going here, right?
Right.
But if you have anything where there is like, you know, split-second decisions, things like that, a change of circumstances in a microsecond or something, and a level of danger, life-threatening danger at any point of time, then this is very different. Then you're going to train very, very differently. You don't need that screaming, you don't need that posing, that peacock, you know, thing, and all that.
So for a long time in the you know, early 1990s to mid 1990s in my dojo, we had a lot of police officers training, and literally every night, you know, one of them would come in and say, "Last night this happened, and the guy came at me like this, and I did this, but I'm not sure it worked. It worked okay." But I was just thinking maybe we could, you know, go over some stuff, you know, against this type of situation. So for a long time, my dojo was literally a combat laboratory. And then, you know, I remember Sherman Harrell coming in one time and telling me he was invited to South Africa when back in the apartheid days. Teach a group, believe it or not, of Uichi-ryu students. Sherman Harrell was very well known within serious martial arts circles. So even though he taught Isshin-ryu, he was invited there to an Uichiru dojo to teach his techniques, his fighting techniques. He told me, he said, I saw people that had these massive scars on their forearms. And I said to the chief instructor, I said, what are those scars from? And he says, those scars are from hatchets. From hatchets. And he said, it's very dangerous here. And Sherman Harrell said to me, he says, Mike, I couldn't believe how those people trained. Because those people knew that they were going to have to use their karate. And these were civilians, he said. But that it was so dangerous, that they were so concerned with these gangs that would attack them and try to rob them and murder them, that he said, I've never seen people train in karate like these people were training in South Africa. And again, it goes back to your point that, in my dojo developed a certain way because obviously I was a police officer. I wasn't interested in it from a sport context. I was only interested in it. Can this save my life? Can this save the life of someone else? And there have been several occasions where my computer programming students, guys that are not in so-called dangerous jobs, but for whatever reason, someone tried to rob them or someone whatever, and they were able to defend themselves and come out on top. So to me, that was important, And, one of the things I discussed with Gaka Sensei and Isao Irie Sensei, I don't know if you're aware of Isao Irie Sensei.
Which one?
Isao Irie.
I didn't get it acoustically.
Ide Sensei, Isao Ide. He studied
Ide, yes.
Okinawa Kempo and Matoshi Kobudo. So
yes.
So I was sitting with him and Gaki one time, and Ray Sensei speaks perfect English. So he speaks very good English. So he was translating, and he said to me, Michael, we have a problem on Okinawa. We lose the children's students at around middle school. They quit karate. And I said, he goes, as soon as they go to middle school, they start doing other sports like soccer and basketball and baseball.
Baseball, probably.
And I said to him, well, Sensei, with all due respect, you guys have made a huge mistake in Okinawa. And I said, the mistake is you turn karate into a sport. And if you look at karate as a sport compared to other sports, I go to the karate tournament, I get in my sparring match, and I lose the first match. So it lasted about 30 seconds to a minute, and I'm finished. I go out, I do one kata, I come in fourth. So my total time of being out there and performing is about 2 minutes. And I sit around for 8 hours at this karate. Yeah. But if I go play basketball, I'm running up and down a court. And this is what I told Gakia and Ire. And when I finished, and I said, there's nothing wrong with doing karate as a sport if you want to do that. I said, but when you take away the seriousness of it as a life protection art and a way of life, and you limit it to only being in the sport realm, you diminish it. And when you diminish it, people don't take it as serious. And the kids like, this is boring. Boy, this basketball is so much more fun. I don't want to do karate anymore. But I said, maybe if you made karate about him at being able to really protect himself, even though it's safe on Okinawa, that could still happen, right? And you make it a more interesting study, because the techniques in life and death situations are much more interesting than the techniques in sports situations. Maybe you would keep those kids and they'd stay practicing karate and also do those other sports. And they looked at each other and they turned to me and they said, wow, we never looked at it from that perspective. And I said, yeah, I think Okinawa has made a big mistake in terms of the way they look at karate. And now they're turning it into a whole tourist industry. I mean,
how many stakeholders are there now? There are just too many stakeholders. And everybody's trying to, this is, I think, a matter of Japanese society. They have to contribute to that, even though they think it's not the right thing. But the good thing is, as you said, they listen to you, they ask questions, right, and then they consider what they hear about it. But they want to bring it all, they have the traditional, then they have the, gold medal in the Olympics.
Right.
Let's not talk about the bad things of the Olympics. Let's not talk about that. They basically, Japan bought it for this one tournament, and basically, you know, that Okinawa took it back because before the Shichibukai and everybody else, they stole the kata from Okinawa, from Nagamine, from Ryu, and they got all those gold medals and everything, and now they paid them back. The Okinawa took it back, and that's a genius strike by Sakamoto Sensei. But inside of Okinawa, oh, it's difficult.
Right.
Because yes, too many stakeholders with different ideas, and they try to bring it all together. Uehara Kunio of the Karate Kaikan, he tried to explain it to me. I didn't get it completely, but he said basically, oh, there's traditional karate, there's self-defense karate, there's sport karate, there's cultural karate, and it's all one. It was a little difficult to imagine how that's going to work. So there are many good things happening in Okinawa. Like the Kaikan, it's an amazing architecture, it's an amazing building, it's beautiful.
Right.
And it's a beautiful stadium inside. I think they are. I think financially they're still in the red zone. But then now they have the tourism. They have the company Kenny Ueda. He's doing the tourism company. They're working now, I guess, officially for the karate tourism sports department of the prefectural government, which is this is so interesting. Well, you know what they did? You know what they did in the prefectural government karate division? There was a guy in Japan who held a kata and kobudo karate and kobudo kata program of a demonstration for the opening of the Naha Butokuden in 1939.
Okay.
And everyone was in there except a few people. Some of the loud people, you know, of the loudspeakers who claim the most traditional, they were not in there for some reason. So guys were there, like Nakaima, he demonstrated Kobudo. Matayoshi Shinko, he performed Kobudo. Kian Shine, Kobudo, and a few others. And then Nagamine Shoshin, there were so many. Gojuri Miyagi Choyun, I think he was there. Higaseko. Then Shorin-ryu, the Kobayashi style, there were many guys, and there was Nagamine, he performed Chatanyara Kusanku, and it was written there, Chatanyara Kusanku, which is amazing because it's the first time the name was ever shown. And after him, there was Kian Chotoku, who performed Chinto, and that was unknown. This program was unknown. And the guy, he went to Okinawa and he took all his archive and he said, look guys, he went to the Okinawa prefectural government karate district. He said, look guys, this is what I have. I want to give it to you so you can use this. And they said, we don't want it. Because Sensei X and Sensei Y probably, they weren't on there. So they said, let's put this away.
Right, you know, we don't want to see it.
We don't want to see it. And then, luckily, and this is the stakeholder thing in Okinawa, it's not a homogeneous thing. It's the very different guys there working. Then the prefectural archive, they said, this is amazing. This is a valuable asset, a historical source that's unseen, unheard of before. And they took it in. So it's now preserved. So, you know, everybody says we're the official Okinawan karate guys. You come to us.
Well, if you remember when that Okinawan Sensei released the videos of that demo, the black and white videos from that demo, I think in 1961.
Yes. Yeah.
I remember I was still living in New York, and every morning I'd wake up and there'd be a notification of another video popping up. And I would get so excited. Right. And I remember the day the Yamani-ryu one popped up.
Yeah.
With Chinen Sensei.
Chinen Masami, yes.
Right. And then I watched him do the kata and I was like, huh? Wait a second. That looks like very similar to the way I do bow kata. It's not all this like, flowy spinning things that and look, don't get me wrong. I have no problem with that. Like I have no problem with using the bow in that way that, if that's what great. But, I'm like you said, I'm listening to certain people saying, well, I do it exactly the way Chinen Sensei did it. But then I'm watching Chinen and I'm watching that person who says he does it the way Chinen does it. And I'm like, no, you're not doing it anything like Chinen Sensei. And again, my thing is, I'm an American. You can do whatever you want, right? I mean, if whatever you enjoy, go ahead and do it, right? But I always find it funny that they make these claims and then you see a video is found of someone. And now it's like, wait a second. And the other thing with some of those videos, which really got me to thinking was, I watched some of the older guys like Shosei Kina demonstrated Sai, I believe.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Oh, my God. Yeah. Oh, my God. Right. And then there was a gentleman that demonstrated Wansu. And I remember when he did Wansu, he wasn't overly concerned with chambering, like from a particular spot on his body. It was like his hands were just kind of more relaxed. Like he wasn't, well, my hand has to be on my hip or my hand has to be. It looks so much more natural, so much more free, not so stiff. And, when I finished watching that, I was like, okay, so some of these guys probably started training in the late 1800s, right? I mean, I think Kina in that video is pushing 80, if I remember, right? And you see the way he manipulates the sai and how free he is with his movements. There's no stiffness. And it just got me to thinking, again, that, have we in karate and kobudo taken a step back? Like because of the modern ideas of how to perform a kata and worrying so much about how we look instead of about how we utilize the body. And, I'll mention this to you too. I study Shihei Kwan, feeding crane kung fu with Lu Changyi Sensei, Shifu rather. And when I first met him and I took a seminar with him, after about an hour, we took a break and he grabbed me by the arm and he dragged me over to the side. And he said, Michael, I really like the way you move. And I said, oh, thank you, Shifu. Thank you. Much appreciated. And then he said to me, he says, we know karate had this power. We know karate had this power. What happened? Right? And he's talking about the striking power, like the true power to strike someone and cause tremendous damage. And, he says, I don't understand what happened to karate because we know they had it. Because they have Miyagi Chojun in their lineage, whether it's legitimate or not. They mention Miyagi Chojun in their lineage, feeding crane. And I said to him, well, I think World War II hurt things. I said, we lost a lot of masters and we lost a lot of historical, knowledge and different things. And I said, the emphasis on sport. When the emphasis is on sport, you don't have to worry about hitting somebody hard because that's not the goal, right? The emphasis becomes that when someone's trying to harm you and you have to stop them. That's when you want to be able to hit somebody hard. That's when you want the power of karate to really be there. But I found it interesting. He was a high-level Chinese martial arts master, basically lamenting how karate had changed and they'd lost the power that they once had. And that kind of made me take a step back and evaluate certain things, And I just found it very interesting. And as you know, I also studied Chen style Tai Chi Chuan. So, we hear all the time that karate comes from China, but then, when I look at a lot of the karate, I'm not seeing a lot of Chinese principles in it. Now studying these Chinese arts, now I'm like, oh, that principle should be here in karate. That principle should be there. And I interviewed Russ Smith a couple of weeks ago, and he said to me, he says, Michael, I can see that you're putting some of the Chinese concepts in your karate. And I said, yeah, well, my goal is to make my karate as strong as possible. So I don't subscribe to one particular way. Like one of the things I say all the time is like, and you've talked about this too, is where it becomes factional. Well, my teacher says in Isshinryu, my teacher says to do it like this, so I'll only do it like this. And he's right on everything, and everybody else is wrong. And my idea is I take a principle-based approach where I prefer the principle over the personality. Like I want to really learn how to do it. And that's one of the things I liked with, like, in terms of Kobudo, Gaka Sensei, and even some of the other Matoshi Sensei, Matoshi teachers that I trained with. It was never, well, it's my way or the highway, right? Like I demonstrate, I showed a fighting technique one time to Gaka Sensei, and he didn't like it, right? and when he walked away, Yogi Sensei came over to me and goes, "I like yours better." So I kind of laughed, right? So one teacher didn't like it, the other teacher liked it, right? But there's nothing wrong with that. But so what's your plan now for volume 2?
Oh yeah, that's gonna be tough, because first of all, I need time to do this work. So obviously I have prepared for this book, for the Kobudo, long ago. Like I started maybe 2008 and 2009 with the study, a study made by the prefecture. And then there was Hokama's book, which had similar content, and I guess he took it from the study from the prefecture. I'm not sure, I don't know exactly. And then I had some experience and lived in Okinawa and all of this, and checked more. And then there was another book published in 2019, also in Japanese. So at some point I said, okay, I need to finish this. And although it seems weird, because I'm actually more interested in the martial arts kind of kata.
Right.
And that's my main study subject. Right. So I look at the kata. It's a choreography. It's a special techniques. Like you mentioned before, like the kata you have in Isshinryu, that they're difficult. Or Chinen, Chadayana no kon, Hamahiga tonfa, Urashi no kon, Shishi no kon, Tokumini no kon, right? Is it that? Yeah. That's what Tokumini no kon would be enough, actually, as a bokata, almost.
Right.
Yeah. But in the Taira lineage, you have so many kata which are basically the same. The same idea, same thing. You have a front lane, then you go left, you go right, you go once on the road, you go to 100 turn, and so on. It's very similar. Same technique, but each kata has some kind of special technique in it.
Right.
So you gotta learn all those kata to get the idea what did the founder intend with it. He didn't. You probably, okay, you get a good physical workout if you run through all these kata. Right. But where's the technique that's going to save you?
Well, what's interesting is I always wonder, like, what Tatsuo was thinking. Like, here he's studying with Taira. And is Taira suggesting the kata Tatsuo should learn? Or did Tatsuo look at Taira do kata and say, hey, I'd like to learn this one and this one? I mean, like, I don't know, but it's fascinating, because I remember demonstrating one time Urashi no kun for Matayoshi people. And they were like shocked that you hold the bow like this in a lot of the kata.
Yeah.
And they were fascinated by that. And like, that's why, like, the same, I feel the same way that you. Like, those 3 bow kata in Isshinryu, they are rough. Like, and my senior guys, I'm training people over 30, 35 years. I just celebrated the 40th anniversary of my dojo. And my guys, whenever I go back to New York, the first kata they want to go over, the black belts in Isshinryu, the senior guys, the first one is always Shishi no kun. Sensei, can we review Shishi no kun? Because they say it too. It's so hard. It's just so hard to do, And I find it fascinating. Like, I'd love to be able to sit down with Tatsuo and say, hey, why these kata? Like, why? But I'm just glad he picked those, because they are hard, and I prefer that they be hard and more difficult, because you have to work at them to be proficient in them. They're not easy,
Oh, they're not easy.
No.
Even inside, they are. Sometimes you think one of those teachers must have been a very mean person, because they build in some things to make it even more difficult.
Yeah.
So,
I say to people all the time, we're looking at these kata sometimes through a modern lens. But I say, okay, 100 years ago, I'll use 100 years just as a general example. You learn a kata like Seisan, you learn Shinto, you're doing these jump kicks. I mean, these were supposed to be also, systems to build your body, to strengthen your body. So, you do these jumps and these spins and stuff, and not everything's about fighting. Some of it's about training the balance. Some of it's about working your leg muscles. Oh, I'm jumping and doing a double kick to strengthen my legs, And, you see that in like a kata like Shishino-kun, where you do the one jump in the air and you spin and you land. It's ridiculously hard. It's crazy hard to do it and do it well, But, and I think like with Taira Sensei, I think Taira Sensei, and you can correct me on this because you're in that lineage. I really think he wanted to preserve as much as possible. He was a guy who was worried that these forms, these kata, would disappear. And he was like, I'm going to preserve as much as possible. And I think that's why there's so many bo kata and so many kata in his system, that he was trying to create a catalog, and preserve it so it didn't die. I don't know what your feeling is on that, but
yeah, it's a basically I think it's the same idea. So it's basically that is the core or the core of the idea. But at the same time, I think he was also a very creative guy, and he was a great choreographer. So these kata are not necessarily like they are old, like 150 years old or so.
Right.
So he began changing kata already in 1938 in the Karate-do Taikan. He has a Shushino-kun old style, and he renamed it, and he changed some of the techniques.
Okay.
So but later he took the renaming, he undid the renaming and invented a complete new kata with that name. That's Kongo no Kon. It's a complete new kata, but made from bits and pieces of other kata.
Okay.
He made Sakugawa no Kuncho and Sakugawa no Kundai. He made Shushino Kuncho and Shushino Kundai, probably. He Oyabiku More. So he took the end of Chonokon. Chonokon of Taira lineage is completely different kata than other Chonokon. The end of Chonokon and build it at the end of Shushino Kundai. And all kind of these things which are confusing for most people even today.
Right.
Even today. So, for example, Urasoe no Kon. When you look at the kata lists, for example, in Shimukan Dojo, it says Urasoe no Kon, bracket open, Gyakute Hantakwa, bracket close. Gyakute is that, the upper grip, right? Which is a great technique, which works just it's just great. But it's very specific to this kata. It's a core element, a characteristic technique of this kata. And this is actually from the Tsukin tradition, right? Hantakwa is from the Tsukin tradition.
Okay.
So to this day, nobody knows, or no one wanted ever to say how Taira did it. Recently, someone told me, who was that? Taira was in some dojo. Was that Higaseko dojo?
Okay.
And or was that Higayuchoku? I believe the Kyudokan, and there were people who remembered. So that was some time ago, who remembered, so older people, maybe 20, 30 years ago, who remembered that Taira was there and trying out his new kata. So he was creating kata.
Okay.
He took a technique, a special technique, for instance, in Yakano side. When you look at the side kata, it gets even more clear. And the problem is, no one on Okinawa knows all the kata. So they will never get there to have a bird's eye view of all of it.
Right.
Because you have to cross a study and so on.
Right.
So you have similar parts, and you have 3 kata that have basically the same embusen. It's just the same. Hamahiga no sai, Yaka no sai, and Hantakwa no sai. And Hantakwa no sai, they don't do it in Okinawa anymore. They do it in Japan. So if you know this kata, you know it's the same embusen. 85% of the kata, it's built around it. So Tada took one embusen, or built one embusen, and then just exchanged some techniques and added something here and subtracted something there. And so for Yakano side, it's just one technique. It's a rensoku. It's got like 1, so you got it's kind of uke or whatever you want to use it for. We talked about it before. It's a terminological question. It's just, I call it uke, but hey, it can be a lot of things, right? It can be knocked to the wrist or whatever, or even to something against the weapon, whatever. So it's 1 and then inside, outside, back. So, and you do that fast. 1, and that's all. That's a special technique of Yakano side. Everything else is in all other kata, right? So why do you need a complete kata? You give it a name that until a few years ago, nobody could answer what is Yaka. Right. Now, Motobu Naoki Sensei, the grandson of the great Motobu, the fighter, he clarified that there was a private tutors back then, you know. So the rich kids kids from Sweden,
they get to go train with the more serious teachers, right?
Yeah, no,
I'll give you an example. My daughter's degree is in theater, performing arts. So my daughter was in high school, you know, very good singer, dancer. We hired a professional voice coach who was not cheap. No, we were lucky. We could afford it. And, you know, now she's graduated college and she changed her career. She's a sound designer. She's a sound designer. But the point is we were able to afford good instructors. And my one son became a professional baseball player. So my son was a professional baseball player, and it's the same thing. At a certain point, you know, people kept telling us how good he was. He has both of my sons. My other son was the captain of his college baseball team. So they're both super athletes. So we took them to real high level baseball teachers that really, you know, that had World Series rings and had won. These guys really knew the game. So yeah, I could understand where if you were rich in Okinawa and you knew about this famous teacher and you wanted your son to get some good martial training, well, I can afford it. I'm going to take him over there and I'm going to pay for it. Yeah. And they get that benefit. So go ahead, go on with the Motobu Choki and Motobu Choyu. So go ahead. So he Yaka. Go ahead.
So the if you look at the kata, everybody knows that Tayashiki developed a few kata. So they keep it a low profile. They say, he made Kongo no Kon, and then Sarushin, and they forgot Sarushin on Okinawa in the main lineage dojo. They have a written description, but they don't remember. They don't have video. They don't know how it works. So they have the Sarushin somewhere in the cupboard, and show it, but they don't do the kata. And it's not a big thing anyway. You know, you want to twirl here, twirl around, make a knot or something. You know, bind the person and whatever. You know, roll around the weapon and pull it off and things like that.
Gaka Sensei said, I asked him about a Saruchin kata. He said, no kata, only techniques.
Yeah.
That's what Gaka Sensei said.
Yeah. So the fact that nobody wants to talk about that, like Taira, the idea that Taira developed most of his 45 kata or something, or how many does he have?
There's a lot.
Probably he developed them, most of them, after 45. He had a good education so he had a tradition from Yabiku Moden. we know that Yabiko Moden performed Chonokon, the Taira lineage Chonokon, with beautiful longer katas, really sophisticated, good kata. That Yabiko performed it in 1921, so it existed before. And then we have the old style Shushinokon, old style Sakugawa-nokon. We know how they look like. We know Soeishi Ryo with the Shishinokon. It existed once. It was a royal bujutsu. But here again, it seems like that Taira took a few characteristic techniques, the good techniques, like the long swing, like that, you know, and whatever, the rotation, and when he dropped down and did the long strike, bam bam, and the rear hand like Agawin, and then the Agawuchi, whatever, the combing upwards, and these kind of techniques were probably the core of it. But he probably saw it, studied with someone. He traveled around, asked people, show me something, and then he created build kata, like a choreograph, you know. And the basic idea of kata in Kobudo, well, there were, you know, Shushin-no-kun, Sakugawa-no-kun, Yunegawa-no-kun, Shirotaro-no-kun, and then you have the idea, then you have the blueprint to use for further inventions.
So like in terms of the Matayoshi Bokata. So when we see Matayoshi Chon no Kun. So like your thoughts on that? Is that from like how is that fit into the whole thing? Like is that based on the Taira Chon no Kun? Is it based on the older Chon no Kun? Is it just a Matayoshi creation? I mean,
I have no definite lead on anything in terms of Matayoshi, because I don't know practically. I haven't studied it deeply. I can distinguish the kata if I see them.
Right.
But that's about it. As far as I know, the basic syllabus of Matayoshi Kobudo, and I think you helped me with the old papers back then.
Right. Yeah.
It was fixed about 1960 something, 1967.
Right.
And you had a 5 bokata, including Shishinokon, which is different Shishinokon.
Right.
It's also Soeishi.
Right.
So the thing is, and you mentioned it before, why these claims? Because the claims are the problem. Right. Nobody cares about the techniques are great. I said the techniques is wonderful. It's beautiful.
Well, you know,
it's why do you have to invent some, what is that, Chon Uekata? There is no Chon Uekata. That doesn't exist. The kata is great, it's great technique. The thrust from below and this long batting stroke.
Well, that's one of the things that bothers me a little bit. Like, I just, if I see a kata and I find it interesting, the movements, I got to be honest with you, I don't really care where it came from. I mean, that's something for just like nerds like me and you who are totally into martial arts, who want to discuss the history and all these things, which again is important. But again, from a physical standpoint of training, you know, like I'm figuring the first 2 sai kata in Matayoshi Kobudo, Nichozai and Sanshosai, are 100%, I'm pretty sure, creations of Shimpo Matayoshi. And then the third sai kata, which is Shimbado no sai, you know, Gaka Sensei said those techniques come from his father, Shinko, or the grandfather even. So that kata is older. And if you do the 3 of them, one after the other, you realize the third kata has a dramatically different feel. Like it doesn't feel anything like the first 2. So it gives you the idea that the techniques come from a kind of a different source, you know. But, you know, my thing is I mean, we even in Matayoshi Kobudo, we see Kimo Wall Sensei do the kamakata, and it's different from the kamakata that Gaki Sensei taught me. And I understand from both Gaki and Yogi Sensei that, you know, Matayoshi Sensei was giving his students a lot of freedom to go out and experiment. Like Yogi told me Matoshi Sensei had heard that there was a teacher teaching Ufutan Bo.
Yes.
And he sent Yogi and I think Miyashiro Sensei and I think a third guy go learn this Bo kata from him. And they went and learned it. And, Yogi's version is a little bit different from Miyashiro's version. And it's an interesting kata, right? But we don't know that much about it. Like, we don't know its real origins. Like, the story I was told was, Matoshi heard about this guy practicing this Bo kata, and he sent 3 of his guys over there to learn it. And it's
an amazing story.
Yeah. And it's still not an official part of Matoshi, but a lot of Matoshi people practice it. So, for instance, I said to Gakia, after I had learned the whole system, so I knew all the kata. I said to Gakia Sensei, are there more Bo kata? He said, there used to be, but we only do the 5 now. I said, so you don't know anymore? He goes, no. He points to Yogi. He says, tell Yogi to teach you Ufutan. Right. So I went over and I said, Sensei, can you teach me Ufutan? And he says, sure. So I learned Ufutan. Right. And, and I wanted to learn the Nakazato version of, Tokumini, and I did. So I could compare the two, And even the Shishino-kun of Matoshi Kobudo and the Shishino-kun of Isshinryu, there are some techniques that are similar. Like, it's funny. People that do Matoshi say, those kata are completely different. There's nothing that's even remotely similar. And then the Isshinryu guys say the same thing. Oh, Mike, when you do that shishi, it's not. But knowing them both and practicing them, there's some similarities into some of the techniques in them. Not a lot, but there's a few that are similar where you say, does this come from the same toolbox of techniques? And these were picked for the Taira version, and these were picked for the Matoshi version. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, they're different, but there's some similarities there,
It can be that there's a transformation in the 2 lines, right? That is the different closes, the different habit, the different emphasis in how they strike, how they do the technique, that after 10, 20, 40 years, it looks completely different. But it's the same, how do you call it? When you have a thunderstorm, there are small particles, aerosols,
right,
in the air, where the cloud starts to crystallize from.
Right.
Like similar to that. So it grows around it, but it's completely different because it looks different. Because it can be. It's very difficult to prove. But still, in terms of Taira and Isshinryu, so Shishino-kun. That's interesting because Shishino-kun in Okinawa still exists, but one stream came back from Inuya.
Okay.
And another is a little different.
Okay.
It's a little different kata. It's in the Akamine lineage still, but it was let's say it like this. They probably didn't train it for 40 or 50 years or something.
Right.
They probably redevelop it now from maybe videos and or descriptions. They are old kata descriptions by the former head sensei. But it's a one I posted yesterday, so it's nothing big. But you can see this is the same as Isshinryu.
Right. It's those same tools, though. It's those techniques that are in a box, and one teacher's going to pull. Well, out of these 100 techniques, I like these 10. Well, I like 5 of those, but I'm going to pick 5 a little different. So you have a slight variation. You have, it's not the same, but you see kind of those similarities there. You know what kata I like a lot? I like the Chatanyara Bo kata.
Oh, that's a cool one too.
Yeah, I like that kata.
Some people, they know these kata, but in Okinawa you have to go through the ranks, right? Yeah. And there are so many people who control these ranks, right? So, and sometimes they're okay. They're good administrators,
right?
And but they are concerned with so many things except the technique. And my idea was from the beginning I want a bird's eye view, so I can understand the connection and I see the connection between the kata. what is the specific technique. And I want to go there, what Taira Shinken in his book said, and everybody else on Okinawa also forgot in the meantime, that he said, look, you do this kata, you train this kata in order to be able to freely use the weapon.
Move, yeah. So I'll give you an example. So I study Chen style Taiji Chuan, and we have a straight sword form and a broadsword form. Okay, so the straight sword form, originally there was no form. Form didn't exist. It was military guys that practiced with a partner, and they just practiced techniques. Why? Because they knew they were going to have to use this sword for real. Okay, but now guns come in. And now all of a sudden, we're not carrying swords. So someone decides, and this is what my teacher told me, Chen Jianghua. He says, Mike, the form is modern. The techniques are ancient. He says, so someone decides, well, you know what? We really kind of liked this sword. We liked practicing with the sword. It was fun. And then they take the techniques and they put them in a pattern. And they create the form so they can preserve it and practice it and still have fun with it. And now we do the reverse, right? So now you learn the form, and then you have to pull the techniques out and you practice it with a partner. Right? But, but you know, like, so I'll give you, for instance, in my own training. So I've been doing jiu-jitsu for a very long time. By the way, I wanted to ask you, I have a list of all the Sosui Shitsuru techniques. I was, you know, and I've been reading, I follow Naoki Sensei through Medium. And he's been covering all the Satsuma, the jiu-jitsu and stuff. So the style I teach, Sosui Shitsuru, is from Fukuoka. They were a member of the Satsuma. So I don't know if he would be interested in the list of the Sosui Shitsuru techniques.
I think so.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'm friends with him on Facebook. I'll scan him in and I'll send it to him through Messenger. And if you want him, I'll send him to you too. If you want to just take a look at them to see what they look like.
I love to take a look.
And then on my channel, you can see me doing some of those, the kata and the sword kata. So if you want a visual reference, you'll see them there. But anyway, so one of the other things, do you still have a few minutes, or do you have to go?
Yeah, but I wanted to say something. You said your daughter was a voice trainer, and I noticed when I speak in English, I tend to talk louder than I used to talk, because usually I talk very soft. Right. You know, I'm a very soft talker usually. And then it's this microphone. I'm always afraid that the microphone, I need to speak louder so the microphone gets it over. So I'm sorry for talking so loud.
No, you're good. I can tell through the video you're good.
Yeah,
and also, if it comes across loud, I can always lower the volume when I edit it. So don't worry.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Just so you know.
Yeah. So let me. I want to show a couple other things, and then I'd like to talk about Motobu for a few minutes, if you got time.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
So first off, I want to show some of your other books. Okay.
Oh yeah, the Only Yoshio. Yeah.
You know, these are. I got to tell you, every time you come out with one of these things, I get very excited. Right. So, and you know, I tell my students, and you know. Another great little book, right? And this one is, you know, again, and you know, McCarthy has his version. They're all great. I have them all. Okay. And then I want to show this, even though
you have it
available. Okay.
Oh, you got that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's not really available, but, and you know, so I want to be honest with you. So this isn't a book where I sit and I read it cover to cover. This is a book where I sit, I look at the index, and I want to read about that today. And I sit there and I read that section, and I try to absorb it. And it's almost the same thing with this new Bo book. Like, I read a part of it, and then I look at the videos, and then I put it aside for several days. And then I pick it up again, and I'm looking again, because it's almost like overwhelming. There's so much information and so much material. If I try to do it all in a short amount of time, so I actually like that. Are there any plans to do this in an ebook format?
I actually have the plan. First of all, thank you for having all these books. It makes me really proud. And I know working towards a user experience. So I don't expect anybody to read this book, like start on page 1 and then go through it. But actually, I expect the people to go to the index, look for something of interest, and then pick the 10, 20, 25 minutes. This is very difficult English. Then it's the English language plus specific terminology from a certain field, sometimes historical field, then Okinawan language, then this is very, very tiring for the.
So I just want to mention one thing that still sticks with me from Karate 1.0. The explanation of putting the cannon, the small cannon, on the end of the staff,
the ball, the tapered one,
and that's the reason. That could be the reason why bow are tapered. And I remember reading that and literally sitting back and going, "Duh!" Like, because obviously I know about firearms, right? And I said to myself, I said, we look for all these, magical, fancy reasons for things. And it just made so much sense, right? And but even some little tidbit like that, like to me was like a wow moment, like wow, okay, right? And then even in the book, the mention that the Okinawans had firearms, the Okinawans had an armory, right? And dispelling a lot of these myths, which and I know, you're doing this long like me. Karate was developed by farmers. No, it wasn't. Farmers didn't have time to develop karate. They're busy working in the fields, right? And all these things, and so it's books like this that are important because it dispels a lot of these myths. And frankly, I find the real history more fascinating than the myths.
It is. That's
the real history is more fascinating.
Yeah.
And like I said to Russ Smith when I interviewed him 2 weeks ago, and I said it to McCarthy Sensei also, I said, I want the warts and all. I don't want some whitewashed version of history. I want to know. I want to know the real history. And we're all human. So it's okay these karate masters made mistakes, and it's okay to know that they made mistakes because we make mistakes too and we can learn from them, So I want to talk about Motobu a little bit.
Yes.
And I want to get your opinion on some things, right? Because I teach the Motobu drills, and I teach them as, I show them and I try to explain to them, like, look at what Motobu was trying to show us here. Like, he's saying if you're blocking a punch on the inside, you've got to be concerned with that other hand, that other hand, because you're on the inside, that other hand can come right away. So trap that hand as you're moving in. Things along those lines. You might hit the guy, you might hit him, but you haven't hurt him enough and he still may counter and try to hit you again. So you have to be able to go from offense to deflecting that hand to counter. Looking at his drills and then looking at all the modern Yakusoku Kumite we see in all these various styles on Okinawa and in Japan. It's literally like night and day. It's like I'm seeing a completely different martial art. Motobu only moves in. He doesn't retreat. Everything is close in. The techniques he uses all make sense, right? And then I look at the modern Yakusoku Kumite that I'm seeing on Okinawa, where, the guy throws a head punch, I step back, I do a head block. Now I step in and throw a punch to his solar plexus. He steps back and does a middle block. And it's like, thank God we don't have that in Isshinryu. Like, we have no prearranged sparring drills in Isshinryu. Everything we do in Isshinryu is the guy attacks, we counter, right? Some schools do the sport style sparring. I don't do that. But when I first saw the Motobu drills and learned them and have seen them now in several books, it just blows my mind that we have this resource here that he gave us. And then we look at the drills that most modern dojo are doing. And I'm like, okay, guys, have you looked at Motobu Sensei? Have you looked what he was teaching? I mean, how long ago was that? Oh, we're getting close to 100 years ago now, right?
Yes. But it's amazing because Motobu, he came back to Okinawa and he had a small like institute, and it's at Makishi Station today. It's very, very easy to find, still a park there.
Okay.
And he trained a few guys for like about a year, but then he had to close it again. So he influenced a bunch of people. But study in Okinawa is difficult. For example, you take the book, the Kenpo Gaizetsu by Miki Nizaburo, who went to Okinawa in 1922. He interviewed Yabu Kentsu, he interviewed Kian Shotoku, and the students of Kian Shotoku, the schools, they said still in 2000, around 2000, they said, I never heard of this book. So they're uninformed and they're not interested in it. They're not doing this kind of thing. They're also not looking at other schools. They like to make fun of other schools, you know. They say, oh, great sensei. I witnessed that myself. It's a funny story. We went to a restaurant and the head sensei was there, and they had another 10th dan from most dangerous style, and two young guys. And once the older sensei, 10th dan, he went for the bathroom. They turned around, is he gone? Is he gone? And they started bickering. Is he doing it? And they were making fun of fun. And then 2 minutes later, one guy said, wait, shh, he's coming. He's coming back. He's here. Your drink. And so it's super funny how they pretend to have this, this tradition and this ancestor worship and these kind of things. When in reality, they like themselves. They like to go to the dojo. Today's today. Now is now. It's raining. The sun is shining. I want to hear the sound of the makiwara. Right. And that guy is dead. That is what I got an answer. I had an answer. I get a question for Sensei. I said, look, is it true that this guy helped with the development of the kashi in the Kobudo? And he said, he's dead. That's a 9th dan sensei. Right. He looked at me like, what are you talking about? He's dead. Right. There's respect and everything. It's similar to how Miyamoto Musashi talked about the gods and the Buddhas, right? He said, yeah, we really respect them, but I mean, we're living our life today, right? We respect them, but they're not here. Right. And this is it's amazing.
Which on one hand, that sometimes is not a bad attitude, because again, I think some of these martial arts are kind of stuck in neutral, meaning like, well, our founder said this is the way to do it. And my question is, well, what if the founder made a mistake? Yeah. Like, isn't it my job as a senior dan and a senior sensei and someone who's training to develop his physical ability, if I come to a realization that a movement I'm doing isn't being done the best possible way, and I can do it a little better, isn't it on me to improve the art? Or are we just going to keep... So I can understand that attitude of, well, that guy's dead. However, there's also the reverse of that, which we can learn a lot from the past.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I have a feeling sometimes that, and this is also a form of progress, that many things get lost. That's why I look in the old kata. Recently I did the Sakugawa no Kun of Miki, where I don't know if anybody can follow what I'm trying to say there. I doubt it, that most people, I would say, just think, okay, the guy's doing some form there and trying to figure something out, but there are clear evidence that kata are changing and that applications are changing. And as you said with the Jin Masami video that Momo said he uploaded it, where it was clear it's not possible that the guys who said this is our tradition, it's completely impossible that they get it. So today we know that Kishaba was a great sensei and that he invented it all.
Right.
That he took the Tomari no Nani Nani. That's an idea he took from the Matsubayashi Ryu, because
Right.
all important guys from the Kishabaha Yamani Ryu, they were guys who came all from the Matsubayashi Ryu. So they had this 45-degree idea from Shinto and like that, and all this. But that's with the claim thing, and they will never tell the truth, never. So you can know this, and I guess you can talk about it. They're not angry. They're not angry.
No.
They're not. They would. What they're gonna do is they're gonna say, "Hey, when you, in Okinawa next time, come to my dojo for training." So they actually respect that you think about it, because it's not disrespectful to say, okay, 1 + 1 is 2, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's easy to see, and when you gotta love the martial arts of Okinawa to get that far.
Right. So in 1997, I was in the van with my sensei in Okinawa, and we're driving around, and I suggested to him that he film a video series. And he told me no. And I was arguing with him in the car. I said, I have a very close relationship. I said, Sensei, no, you have to do a video series. He says, no. And it's funny because he said to me, there are enough old men on video doing Isshin-ryu karate. That's what he said. He said to me, Mike, you make it. And I looked at him, I said, me? And he goes, yeah, you make a video series. And I said, well, Sensei, if I do a video series, I'll do the kata, but I'm going to do like fighting applications. And I made this series 25 years ago, so it's old now. I look at it now and I get a little aggravated. But back then, for Isshin-ryu people, it was like, where did these fighting techniques come from? Because the fighting applications that the first generation guys came back with from Okinawa were just utter nonsense. I mean, I'm sorry, but they were. They had no basis in reality. So I make the first DVD and I send it to him in Okinawa, because back then it was DVDs, right? And I give it about a month, and I call him on the phone, and I said, Sensei, it's Mike. Oh, how are you? Good. Sensei, did you get the DVD? Oh, yes, it's wonderful. It's fantastic. It shows Isshin-ryu so powerful. Those techniques you were doing. I said, yeah, I know, Sensei, but my bunkai is a lot different from what you're teaching. And he goes, no, you make more. It's great. And, I didn't think about it much at the time, right? Because I'm just happy that he's happy with the product that I did. But now, years later, I realized, like, he was thrilled because it showed Isshin-ryu to be, you could like, wow, this is a real fighting art, right? It's not just for sport fighting and different things. And, so he had no problem with my version of Isshin-ryu, even though it was a little different than his version. And, I say this all the time. When I first went to him in Okinawa in 91, he told me to go out and study with everybody that I thought was better than me. And he said, go out and study with every Isshin-ryu sensei that you think knows something. And he said, what you do is if they do something you like, you take it. And if they do something you don't like, don't. And he goes, same with me. And here's the headmaster. He goes, Michael, if I do something you like, then do it. And if there's some things I do that you don't like, don't do it. But make your own strong Isshin-ryu. And that was the advice he gave me. And I got to be honest, Andreas. It's not often you hear a sensei give you that kind of advice, because most of them are like, I have all the answers. Just stay with me. I'll give you all the secrets. And don't worry about what those other guys are doing. Because what they're doing is really not the right way. Only what I'm doing is the right way. And that really, I felt, helped my martial arts career, because it gave me that idea that, okay, so I can study with multiple teachers in the same discipline. And I can really get a lot of different backgrounds and different opinions and different explanations on things. And I think I'll be a lot better for it. And I even found it in Matoshi Kobudo. I mean, because I didn't just train with Gaka Sensei. There were times when Yamashiro was there, Itakazu Sensei was there, obviously Yogi Sensei. So I think all their different perspectives is excellent. And, I think there's not enough of that now on Okinawa, because again, it's become Coke and Pepsi, right? What do you like? Do you like Coke or do you like Pepsi? Well, no. If you're going to train at my dojo, well, you can only train here. You can't train somewhere else.
Yeah.
So
It still happens because it has become also a place for like private teachers, like guys who would usually teach maybe a language somewhere to kids or yoga or something. They discovered karate as a form of lifestyle, something like that, you know. And so if you find a sensei, you can do that, right?
right.
So you have a great life. You're drinking in the bar every night. That's the Okinawan lifestyle. If you're not in the military,
Right.
That's it. You're out every night, right? It's not too much, but it's that's the way it is. So yeah, but Motobu, and what you said before is, I think the same. That there's a transformation all the time. So they're forgetting things and inventing new things. But it's always saying the new thing, that's the original.
right.
So, and it's you cannot disprove it. You cannot prove it. It's impossible. So you have to like it. And usually the techniques are good. But it's correct that like particularly guys like Motobu, they had a different huge problem. The following of Funakoshi in mainland Japan. They basically, what's the word? I mean, I'm lacking the English word now. I'm thinking. So whether the bad mouthed. Yeah, like you know, he cannot write, he cannot talk, he cannot this, he cannot that. He was a brawler.
He's a thug. He's a thug. He's a thug.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas Funakoshi was this educated teacher, who knew how to speak to groups and knew how to do certain things.
So the generation afterwards, they developed this narrative, right? There's where Funakoshi was a good guy. And even in the West, there's still the people, they need Funakoshi to be the guy who taught Bunkai, original Shogun-ryu, from Asato Anko. And, you know, that lineage, and it's all the original, but in fact, people left him because they call him Peanut Sensei, because he only taught kata.
Right.
And, but then they say, yeah, but there's this book, he's doing a throw in it, or there's a kumite in the 1935 book which Otsuka Hironori did, who came from the Jiu-jitsu before, and he was kicked out by Funakoshi or by Gigo, by his second tier leaders, because he dared to do his own stuff. So Japan is very difficult, and I think there is a lot of agenda in the writing. Also in the books, so we as karate guys in Okinawa, we should be just more careful and ask more questions and say, look, why they Myoto Day? Nobody talked about Myoto Day in Okinawa. Of course, people do this.
Right.
Everywhere on the world, but what's called? I want to know, when did you call it Myoto Day? And because the Motobu book, the 1932 book, it was lost and just recovered in the 1980s and printed in 1990, and then an edition by a student around 2000, and that's where McCarthy Sensei got that from.
The first one I got was translated by Seiyo Iaido from Ryukyu Kempo.
Oh, yeah.
A little pamphlet.
That's the Ryute. I saw the book, but this is out of print, isn't it? Long time.
Yeah, I have it here in my library. And,
but that book, it must be the 1926 book with the kumite in it.
Hold on.
Yes. Okinawa Kenpo Karate Jutsu and Kumite, yes. Okay. That's in 1926.
So it was interesting when you ordered this book. it came with a certificate.
Oh, cool. Oh,
And,
wow. You got another 1,131.
yeah. And you know, when I got this, Jesus, I'm trying to think, when was this? Let me see when this one came out. So this is saying 1977.
Oh,
So now I only started in 79. So what happened was once I started, obviously I'm looking for books, right? I was really into
uh,
martial arts. I'm like, okay, are there any books? In
mm,
Black Belt magazine, they had this little ad for this book. And my sensei had the book. And I'd
uh,
asked him, where can I get that book? Oh, you can't get that book. You can't get that book. And then I saw this ad for the book, and I called up, and they said, "Oh yeah, you can order the book." And I paid for it. I sent it in and got the book, and you know, again, that was my first introduction to some of the Motobu fighting techniques. And again, even then, I'm questioning. Well, boy, these are very different. It's not the stepping back and blocking and then count and then punching. Like these are more fluid. There's a lot more going on here than what we're doing. But
you, you,
good.
you got the whole, like the entering. How do I get inside
Right,
there without just being destroyed or something, you
right,
know? You have
right,
to think about timing, think about
right,
feints,
right,
you know, like feints like cuckoo
right,
and things like, you know
right.
what
Yeah,
I mean.
yeah.
These are things, the tricks, using tricks and something, and hurt the guy, go into the joints and things like that, you know.
Well, when I
Mm.
teach them, I tell the students, I said, I'm not teaching you these drills so you practice these drills. Initially, you
Yeah.
could practice them as drills, as a little, okay, he attacks, boom, boom, you do ABC. But what I want you to do is when we start doing where now the guy's just throwing a punch at you and you just got to counter. I want you, if you like some of the techniques, you can now figure out how to use them in other scenarios, in other situations. Maybe the guy punches this way, maybe he does this, right? And
Mhm.
you know, so again, it's just fascinating to me though that
It is.
these
It
techniques are
is.
100 years old, and in modern Okinawa, they're doing these yakusoku kumite things where they're stepping back and they don't make any sense from a real
It
fighting
makes no
standpoint.
sense. It's cumulated more and more, and soon you got 40, 50 sets of Yakusoku. And then you need to know both sides, so it's 100. And sometimes you have three guys, so it's 150. It's an overload. It doesn't make no sense. And
It's
the
one of
most
it's one
important
of
part,
good.
where are the principles?
Well, right.
Where are the
That's
principles?
right. Exactly. Right. Like
It's more important.
it just doesn't make any sense, right? And that's one of the things, like for me personally, I like about Ishinru that Tatsuo never did the peon katas. The peon. He just refused. He's like, I'm not doing that. That's for school kids. I'm not doing them. And like again, that he was looked down upon for that too, but he was like, I'm not doing them. Those are for school kids. And I see people doing these peon katas, and look, you want to do them, great. But then I see them showing these crazy bunkai and stuff for it. And I'm like, okay, with all due respect, those kata were made for school kids. There was no real fighting really thought in creating those kata, you know? Um, but again, if you want to, delve deep in them, go right ahead. I will tell you, like in the Chinese arts I study, there's no one application for a move. There are multiple fighting applications for every move. And as one of my
Mhm.
teachers says, he says, you have to have a vivid imagination. You have to take such a deep dive into the move and try to figure out every possible way you can use that move in a situation. And, that's the thing. Like, again, with Ishinru, I was shown one application for each move originally. And
Mhm.
again, when I was 15 years old, I don't know any better. But then as I got
Mhm.
older and I became a police officer, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. When would I use this in a fight? Like this is so dumb. Like this can't be the real reason, right? And I'll just mention this. Like I was at a seminar a few years ago in Georgia, in a 10th Dan in Shorin from Okinawa there, and someone asked him to show how to use the last move in the Hanshi in a fight. And he showed an application that was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. And I stood there looking at him and I was just like, wow. Like there was no even response. And I wasn't the one that asked, somebody else asked. And I looked around the crowd because there was a lot of people there. And this is what I saw on people's faces. Like, And he started to walk off and he stopped. And then he came back and he showed a second application. The second one was slightly better than the first one, but it was still. And I remember people like walking out of the room, hearing them talking to each other, going, "Boy, that was BS. Like, what was that?
Mm,
That would never work. What application is that?"
mm.
You know, so again, I think you look at guys like Motobu, I think Yabu Kensu, these guys that had real fighting experience. I think it shows
Yeah.
when you like in Motobu's Kumite drills, it shows that the guy had real fighting experience. You know, I'm looking forward to Thomas Feldman's book on Yabu Kensu.
Yes, it's going to be revealing about the person because Yabu, everybody's fighting over Itosu and who's the successor of Itosu. And of course, the Okinawans, they have concentrated on Shibana Chosen, right?
Of course, right,
So nobody cared about Yabu.
right,
And there's some schools, they have a Yabu kata this, Yabu that, Yabu Goju Shiho.
right,
There are two versions of that, and kind of but it's rare, and
right,
it's astonishing because that guy Yabu, he was when they introduced the conscription in Okinawa in 1893. He was sent to Shurikasa and did the first three conscription checkups, the physical
right,
checkups. That was Yabu. He was the guy who taught karate at the school. He
right,
was the guy who in the 1910s he taught. He was a student of Matsumura in the 1880s or whatever. Taught at the teachers college at the normal school in the 1900s and again in the 1930s. And nobody is a student of them in Okinawa. What they say we are the guys from the Matsumura lineage.
right, right. Well, how about what Motobu says about him?
Oh, they were friends. They
But,
were.
but
Yeah,
Motobu talks about him like his karate was superior to Motobu's.
yeah,
Say,
because they were.
yeah,
I don't know which one was older of the two, but they
not
were
sure either.
in line. They
Yeah,
were in line with their thinking about how karate should be. That it should be a strong, close up, fighting, not athletic kind of a pastime, but some more serious.
right.
That's what they agreed upon, and yeah, it's interesting.
It's interesting that Yabu Kensu's not talked about that much.
Yeah,
I find it a little weird, especially since he also he saw war. He was in wars.
yeah,
I mean, so you're talking about a guy with obviously a pretty serious life. I mean, if he fought in wars, obviously he's a pretty serious guy, and he's had some pretty serious life experiences, right? But he's a guy almost that's just kind of mentioned in passing. That's why when I interviewed McCarthy Sensei, and I said to him, because McCarthy just came out with the Keon book, and I said to him, I said, how about a book on Yabu Kensu? I said to Patrick, and he goes, no, no, Thomas Feldman's writing it. And I was like, oh, he goes, yeah. And he goes, he's taking a deep dive. He's interviewing family members. He's like, really, it's going to be really good, Mike. And, so I was like, oh, okay, great. So like, I reached out to Thomas Feldman. I said, listen, I'm really looking forward to your Yabukensu book. And I hope when it comes out, you'll come on the podcast so we can talk about it. But
mm.
I just think, like you say, he's one of these guys that's almost just always mentioned in passing. And like no
It
one,
is.
it's just, and it's weird because with such a serious life that this guy had,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you know
yeah.
what I
It is.
mean? Like,
Yeah, there must be. What could be the reason? If
yeah,
you take,
it's just
they're not.
strange.
It's very easy, right? If you think about it, what is the reason? Because nobody actually learned from him and trained from him. And he was a guy who actually did the karate everybody claims to do,
Right, right,
but nobody was there.
right, right, right. Yeah. Yeah, it's just it's
Then
funny.
they make fun about the Goju Shiho of Matsubayashi Ryu. They make fun and say, what kind of Goju Shiho is that? That's different from ours. That cannot be real. That cannot be from Matsumura. But Nagamine, he consulted with Motobu and Yabu, and
Right.
they agreed. They agreed. He said that they agreed with Motobu and with Yabu that the kata need to be like they need to be maintained like they are,
Right.
and that the practice need to be serious.
Well, it's funny.
And
I always say Gakia Sensei said one of the top three things that a teacher ever said to me. And I was doing a technique, and I did the technique and I did it fast. And he's like, Chotomate, Chotomate.
oh God,
No, right? So, and then he started laughing. So I started laughing, and he goes, Michael, no. He goes, in that particular kata, that technique is done slow. Then you go fast. And I said to him, well, why? And he goes, I didn't make the kata. And then he said to me, don't put fighting in the kata, put kata in the fight. In other words, don't change the kata to make the moves look necessarily like you're actually fighting, because then you'll lose the proper body mechanics and everything we're working on when we're training kata. He says, when you train with a partner and you're working with the fighting, then you do go hard. And if the move has to change a little bit to make it work, then you do that. And that was a profound thing that he said when he said, don't put fighting in the kata, take the kata and put it in the fighting, you know? And I don't see enough of that in modern Okinawan martial arts. So what are your plans for the future?
oh, well, I'm turning 58 this year, so I'm approaching like in a foreseeable future, like retirement, and
Like me.
obviously, yeah. So obviously, I have to work, and I work a lot of like projects. I mean, I'm a technical writer.
Right.
So for this last book, I left my previous job. So I have because I need 3 or 4 months to finish such a
Right.
work. It's so much work. I'm not going to get into detail, but it's a lot of stuff that needs to be done. So I need the time. Same for the Karate 1.0. I just for that I'm gonna need a half a year to
Yeah.
update it and to finish it. So right now I'm in the application process. So tomorrow I have a application with a huge consultant company from the US, and on Tuesday, I have a job interview in far south in Bavaria. So right now uh, I'm just I'm pretty busy with getting things done. Taking a new step, a next step, and then we're gonna see. So obviously, I was thinking about to go to Okinawa next time. But right now, I couldn't convince myself to go, even though the yen is down. So
Right.
the money is good for us, right?
Right.
Although I think they will just double the prices. Yeah, no, but I wanna go back to Okinawa and train with my sword sensei. And probably do a few visits. It is so that I'm not a member in any of the associations or dojo or something because it contradicts with my studies. So I cannot publish, I cannot talk, I cannot go on a podcast, I cannot make my videos, show them on YouTube, doing some kind of kata. It's all like prohibited,
Right.
right? And I cannot have that. I'm a person who I like my freedom so much, right? So, but I'm hanging in there and I'm doing what I enjoy. And
Right.
sometimes when you're a middle-aged guy like us,
Yeah.
you gotta cook on a lower flame
Yeah.
for a
Yeah.
long time. For you cook on a lower flame. You're not losing anything. You know, when you learn skating, you learn it once. You can do it all.
Right.
You're not in a good condition. You
Right.
struggle maybe a little, but you're not going to lose that for your whole life. Same with bicycle riding or baseball or whatever. The basic skills. I meaning the basic skills, right? So
I'm going to Okinawa later this year.
later this year.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go in November. So in August we have the Ishinru World Karate Association Championships. So Shimabuku Sensei he's coming into Pittsburgh. That's where it is. It's being held in the
Oh,
States this
okay.
year. So because he comes in, I'm not a big tournament guy. I don't like them, but because he comes in, he's my teacher. I go and I get to spend time with him in Pittsburgh. And if they want me to judge, I'll judge. But regardless, um, COVID hit. I had planned to go to Okinawa, and Shimabuku Sensei had told me I could make copies of all the photos he has of his father, everything
Oh,
related to karate. So
no.
now that's my main reason for going back is I want to get that project done where I can preserve all these photos. I'm hoping to conduct an interview with Kichiro Shimabuku. Again, I find when I asked him about the where were you during the war, and he told me so matter of fact, and I realized, okay, well, that's not what most of the Americans think, right? And I said to myself, I think it's important I sit down and just conduct an interview with him and talk to him and hear what he has to say about those early days with his father and everything. And there's so much misinformation. Like, I had guys tell me, well, I trained with Tatsuo in Okinawa and Kichiro, his son, was never there. Well, what year were you there? Oh, I was there this year. Okay, well, he was in Tokyo at college. So of course he wasn't there, right? So just,
Yeah.
just these kinds of things. But again, he's getting older. He's 80, he's 83. He's
Oh,
he's in phenomenal shape. Oh my God. He oh my God. He's I mean, he still runs every day. I mean,
really?
he can kick over his head. He's in phenomenal shape. I mean,
Oh, wow.
he sent me a DVD 6 months ago of him doing all the kata, one right after the other. And he probably filmed it right before COVID. So he was around 77, 78 when he filmed it. He did
Oh,
the kata one right after the other. I couldn't believe it. And,
oh.
and again, a man that age looking that sharp, it's impressive, you know. So he's a poster child to me for, if you practice karate a certain way, you'll have a long, healthy life. If you practice martial arts, long, healthy life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and then I'm gonna, I'll probably visit the Matayoshi Hambu. I'm kind of loosely affiliated with them.
The
Um,
Kodokan?
yeah, to Kodokan I go. I'll work out. Last time I went, I spoke with Yasushi Matayoshi for over 2 hours. He asked me. He had a lot of questions for me, which I found kind of interesting. Um, you know, uh, but I'll go there and and again, I'll go there. I work out. I have fun. Um, and I'm going to see where else. Obviously, McCarthy Sensei's living there. I'm going to get together with him and see what's going on there. There's a guy who has a podcast. He wants to interview me when I'm there, so I'll do that.
Oh,
So
yeah, 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 yeah. It's a friend of mine.
yeah. So I'm gonna, he asked me to do that. I said, sure, and again, I don't go there anymore so much to just be concerned with training. My teacher's older. I want to go see him. He's treated me like a son for a long, long time. He's treated me great. Um, I do like the Okinawan people, so maybe I'll visit some other dojo while I'm there and just go around and have some fun and do a few things. And I have one of my students that wants to go. He asked me if he could go, and I said sure, and just so you know, like I do Katori Shinto-ryu,
Uh-huh.
which is a very old, ancient school of Japanese
That's
Budo.
amazing.
Oh my God. And like as a kid, I never thought I'd get to study that. And now I'm studying with Sugino. I've been studying with Sugino over 15 years. And I don't know that much of it because I just can't get to Japan that often. And I see him once a year in Canada. And I have a very deep sword background. Like the style of jiu-jitsu I studied also has Iai-jitsu.
Uh-huh.
And I also I'm Shodan in Muso Shindenru. So I have a
Uh-huh.
pretty good sword background. But once I started studying the Katori, oh my God. It was,
Now, this is the most amazing
oh my
style.
God. I studied
And,
Yagi, I studied Yagi Shinkagiru too for 2 years. And I thought that was great. But this Katori, man, oh my God.
but can I be honest? I believe that everybody who goes into Iaido secretly wishes to train Katori Shikiri.
So it's funny you say that because I went to visit a guy here. And he said, "Do you do EI?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Oh, how much EI experience you have?" I said, "Oh, about 40 years." And he goes, "Oh." So I showed up and he was working with another student. I started practicing the Katori. And he looks at me and he goes, "You do Katori Shinto-ryu?" And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "No." I'm like, "Yeah, I train with Sugino Sensei. I mean, I'm only a Shodan, right? But I'm doing it a long time, right? And I train." And he's like, "Oh." So he studied briefly with me. But, it's a serious study. What's good with the Katori, too, is they also have Bojitsu.
Yes.
And now you're seeing the bow used a little bit different way. And even in the Chen style Taiji, we have a spear tradition, which they also call a staff. So some interesting ways they use the technique where you see some similarities. You could see where some of maybe the Okinawan stuff came from. So it's kind of cool to see that too. So having that different experience in these other martial arts and seeing how they use the same weapon, to me, it's all fascinating. Like I'm
Oh, yes.
I'm like a kid in a candy store. Like it's all fascinating to me. Like I just love it. Right. And I love seeing the common things through them all. Like I'm not looking for
Yes.
differences. I'm looking for, wow, that's similar to the way we do this. Wow, we do that just like they're doing it. And this is a 600-year-old art. So it's just fascinating to me, all this stuff. But so listen, I appreciate you coming on. I really do. This has been great. I've been a big fan of yours for a long time. Your name comes up constantly because I'm constantly telling, new people join my dojo and, they see my library and like, "Sensei, can you recommend some books?" And I give them authors. I say anything by Andreas Quast, right? Just go look them up, and anything by Pat McCarthy. And now even I've added Russ Smith to that category. And I say, you buy these books, they're good books. They're good things. You'll learn things from them. And, so there's a lot of us out here that appreciate your research, that appreciate what you're doing. Please do Karate 1.0 in another format so more people can buy it.
Thank you so much for telling me that, Michael Sensei, because you never hear that, right?
Yeah, I'm telling
when
you.
you're in your study, you never notice anything like that. So thank you
Well,
very much appreciate
yeah.
it.
So even me doing the podcast, like when I started this, I thought the whole idea was ridiculous. Like someone told me you have to do a podcast. And my response was, "Why?" And they're like, "Well, you've used karate for real. So you have experience. A lot of other karate people don't. You have this background in all these different arts." And, so initially I started just talking about things I wanted to talk about. And that's what the podcast is about. And then I said to myself, well, I know all these guys. Like, why don't I interview these guys? And my thing with the interview, and I think you got this, I just want it to be two guys talking about martial arts. Like the two of us having a good time and not like, me trying to catch you on things. And I just want it to be a fun exchange of two guys talking about martial arts, And
And you told me that, and I appreciate it so much. You said it's going to be fun.
yeah, that's what I wanted to be like. I can't
Yeah.
believe the response to the Russ Smith interview. I mean, the response to the Russ Smith interview has been amazing. I think I'm going to get a lot of good response to this too. So I appreciate you coming on and listen. Uh, Anytime you want to talk about something, like if you decide, hey, Mike, could we talk again? I got this subject I'd like to talk about. Just send me a message. We'll do it. And future books, obviously, something comes out. Come on. Hopefully by that time I have 20,000 subscribers. So you get even more exposure. Your books get more exposures, and this way, I want to promote the guys that I feel are doing the real good work in these areas, and you're one of those guys. So again, I really appreciate you coming on, and I look forward to having you on again in the future.
Well, thank you very much, Michael Sensei. And I made a note that you have been collecting for 45 years close to 200 old VHS tapes, and you're pulling clips off of them and making them digital, uploading them to YouTube, and you have 4,600,000 views since July 2009 and 30,200 subscribers with close to 1,500 videos. That's amazing. Okay, so thank you for having me.
Thanks again. Hope you enjoyed my interview with Andreas Quast Sensei. Hope to interview him again in the future as he comes out with more projects. And if, like I said, if he has something he wants to talk about, love to have him on again. I enjoyed it for myself. Again, just want to mention all the different books he has. Okay, we will have them mentioned, and we'll have a link to his author page on Amazon. Okay, here's the latest book, Bo Volume 1. Highly recommend it. You know, what's great about this book, the QR codes. So you read a section, explains it, and then you click on the code with your phone, and it goes right to a video of what you were just reading about. So it's a great way to do a book. Very interesting. Highly recommend to all my people that are interested in Okinawan Kobudo or the study of Bojutsu in general. Okay, and again, we know we talked about this in the interview, Karate 1.0. I'm lucky enough, I have a copy, but it's hopefully going to be coming out again, either in another format or with maybe even some updated material. So that's good to know. Again, please click that like button, subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. We're almost up to 13,300 subscribers. We're really growing at a nice clip. Consider becoming a member for $2.99 a month. Again, you get these podcasts commercial free. All the videos, all the member videos are commercial free. A lot there of instructional nature if you're interested in learning some of the arts that I teach. So please consider doing that. Again, thanks to all the subscribers, all the members of the channel. Without you guys, I couldn't do this. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next one. All right. Thank you. Take care.